Hello, this is the sixth video in our series of how to read music. And in this video, as you can see, we have music to read. Before we start, I'd like to clarify one point that we spoke about in one of the previous videos about subdivisions. If we have a quarter note and we subdivide it into two equal parts, they're eighth notes. If we subdivide it into four equal parts, they're 16th notes. I'll play the quarter note on my foot. I'll be in 4/4 times. It'll be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll play eighth notes with my hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you can see from our very first video of the series, if you look at the pizza pie diagram, how the 2 eighth notes equal a quarter note. Now 4 16ths also equal the value of a quarter note. So if here are quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I'm playing the 16th notes, there would be 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. Now the group of the 3, I'm subdividing the quarter notes into groups of 3. Now that's something that I can play. Here it is. You can hear I'm playing 3 equally spaced notes per quarter note. But there is no note to represent it. So that is known as an artificial grouping. Subdivisions of the pulse that can be played, but there's no note in existence to represent them. So, if I'm subdividing a quarter note into 3 equal parts, well, it can't be eighth notes because only 2 eighth notes equal the value of a quarter note, and it can't be 16th notes because 4 16ths equal the value of a quarter. But yet, you can play them, and there is no note in existence between eighth notes and 16th notes. So, the rule is, when you have a grouping like that, it's known as an artificial grouping, and you simply make it the same type of grouping as the natural grouping, that's the one that works out mathematically, above it. So we make them eighth note triplets, and we put the little number 3 above or below the grouping. Here I wrote it above the grouping, to show that that is in fact an artificial grouping. Okay, having said that, when reading a real piece of music, you're dealing with melody lines or drum beats, and these lines or drum beats are usually comprised of different subdivisions. You might go from 16ths to eighth notes to triplets, or melody lines. Of course, not every note is going to be the same pitch, otherwise you wouldn't have a very interesting melody. But for our purposes, I believe in going one step at a time. So we're not going to deal with pitch, and the second thing we're not going to deal with is the sustain of a note. Remember, in one of our videos we spoke about the fact that notes have 3 basic parts. The attack, that's where you hit them on which count. The sustain, how long they hold out for. And then pitch, which is what pitch it's on, whether it's ba, 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 and so forth. Those are notes, maybe you find them on the piano somewhere. So we're not dealing with pitches and we're not dealing with sustain. We're only dealing with the attack of a note. That way we only have one thing to think about. And that's why the examples that I gave you are all written on one line. Later, once we get really good at these, then we'll start reading pitches as in real music on the different lines of the staff. Second thing I want to mention before we actually start with the reading is when you are counting a note or a rest, make it very clear whether you're doing it on the paper or in your mind where the count is. For example, 1, 2, in this 4th bar, well, let's go to the 3rd bar. In this 3rd bar, this half note happens to be on count number 3. And it takes up 4 eighth notes. I'm counting eighth notes. So you can clearly see I wrote the 3 very much above it. there's no doubt where I mean that note to have its attack. It's on the 3. Okay? We'll do that throughout all of the bars that I gave an example of. All right, let's get started. The first 3 lines of music here, they're all dealing with the same subdivision. The 4th line is where I mixed the subdivisions. So that's a little bit more difficult than the other 3 lines. The first line, we're dealing with quarter notes and 1/8 notes for the most part, for the entire line. So, bar 1, all the quarter notes. So they are counted and played, if I play just the attack, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Bar 2, quarter note is 1 and, a quarter rest is 2 and. Remember, you still have to count. I'm counting the 2 1/8 notes for that quarter rest. You don't play it, but you count it. Then we have another quarter note on 3 and, then an 1/8 rest on 4, and an 1/8 note on and. So this bar is played 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The following bar starts out with an 1/8 rest. Whatever's first in the bar is called count 1. So the 1/8 rest is on 1, and it only gets 1 count because we're counting 1/8 notes. So an 1/8 gets itself. So if that 1/8 rest is on 1, the following note, whatever it may be, in this case it's an 1/8 note, but it doesn't matter what it is, the following note would be on the and, because the first thing that we see is an 1/8 rest, and that takes up only the 1 count. So we have the 1/8 rest on the 1, the 1/8 note on and, then we have a quarter note on 2 and, takes up 2 counts, 2 1/8 notes, and then a half note taking up 4 1/8 notes, 3 and 4 and. So the third bar is played 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. The 4th bar starts out with a quarter note, 1 and, then has an 1/8 rest, that takes up only the 2, and a dotted quarter note happens to fall on the and of 2, and it takes up 3 counts. So from the beginning of the bar, again, we have 1 and, 1/8 rest on 2, dotted quarter note on and, 3 and then a quarter rest on 4 and. So this bar here, 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. The next bar, 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. Next bar starts with an 1/8 rest. That only takes up 1 count. 1, so whatever's next is going to be on and. And that's a quarter note, which takes up 2 counts, so it takes up and 2. Let's start this bar and play the whole thing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This bar starts out with an 1/8 note. That's just the 1, putting the quarter rest starting on the and it takes up 2 counts because a quarter takes up 2 1/8. So we have 1, and then the rest is and 2, putting this 1/8 note on and. So from the beginning of this bar we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This bar here starts out with a dotted quarter note, takes up 3 counts, starting on the 1, 1 and 2, putting this 1/8 note on and. 1/8 rest on 3, quarter note on and of 3. So from the beginning of this bar we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now to the second line. Second line, we're dealing with our artificial groupings of triplets and also the pulse, the quarter note. Remember, triplets are counted as the 1 triplet. So we have 1, 2, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Notice there's an 1/8 rest taking up the first of the triplet in this group. Again, from the beginning. 1, 2, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet. I'm going to slow down a little bit now from this bar. 1 triplet, 2 triplet. So the rest in the middle takes up the trip. 1 triplet, 2 triplet. In this triplet, we have a quarter note taking up the first 2 eighth notes. So that would be, starts on the count of 3. 3 triplet. So from the beginning of this bar, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4. The last is just a quarter note, that's the pulse. Here, 1 for the first quarter note, quarter rest, 2. So we have 1, 2, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Notice on the 4 triplet, the first is an eighth note taking up the first eighth, and then it's followed by a quarter taking up the second 2 eighths. So that would be 1, 2, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Half note takes up 2 pulses because we're in 4/4 time. Quarter note gets the pulse. Half note takes up 2 of them. 1, 2, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. This bar, first triplet, the quarter note takes up 2 eighths followed by the third eighth note. 1 triplet. Then we have an eighth rest followed by a quarter note. The eighth rest takes up 1 count and the quarter takes up 2. So it's from the beginning here, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4. The third line, again, all in 4/4 time, we have the quarter note and then we have subdivisions into 4 parts. So to start we have 1, or if I wanted to count 8 notes, even though I'm playing a quarter note, I could count 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 and quarter rest, 2 and. So from the beginning of this second bar, 1 and 2 and 3 E and a. So we're resting as a 16th rest taking up the E. So that would be 3 E and a. And now for the 4 E and a, we have the 4 is an eighth note taking up 2 16ths, taking up 4 E. So that would be 4 E and a. Remember, any note only gets 1 hit. So this 4 is an eighth note taking up 2 16ths, but you don't hit them both. You only hit where it starts on the 4 E and a. In this bar, we're playing 1 E and a. Then we have a dotted eighth note, which takes up 3 16ths, if you remember from one of the past videos. So that's starting on 2 E and. Those are the 3 16ths that the dotted eighth note takes up. So we have from the beginning of this bar 1 E and a. Then we have 2 E and a, 3 and 4 and. So I have to jump my count from going from 16ths to eighths. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 and 4 and. Here we have the bar is starting on a 16th rest, which takes up 1, you don't play it, and then it puts the next note, which is an eighth note. It starts on E, but it takes up 2 16ths, E and. So we have 1 E and a. Now 2 is a 16th rest, so it's 2 and then E, and that's the 16th, so it only gets itself, putting the next note, which is an eighth note, on the and a, gets 2 16ths. And then 3 is a quarter note taking up just the 3, or if you wanted to count 3 and, or if you wanted to count 3 E and a, it doesn't matter. And then for the 4, we have a 16th note taking up just the 4, putting the next note, which is an eighth note, on the E, and it takes up E and. Eighth note takes up 2 16ths. And then the last 16th is on the a. So this bar, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 and 4 E and a. Last bar on this line, a dotted eighth. I'm sorry, a dotted quarter. I'm looking through the paper, so everything is backwards to me. A dotted quarter takes up 3 eighth notes. We don't need to count 16ths here. Just count eighths. It takes up 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and a. The last eighth note is divided into 2/16. Now the last line is where we're mixing counts from quarters to eighth notes, the subdivision into 2 parts, the triplets, and also subdivision into 4 parts, the 16th. So we have 1, 2, and 3 triplet, 4 E and this bar starts out with a dotted 8 taking up a dotted quarter, taking up 3/8, so that would be 1 and 2, and then this first 16th starts on the and but takes up and so we have 1 and 2 and 3 triplet, 4 E and The next bar starts out with a 16th rest, so that's, we're going to count 16ths, 1 E and The 16th rest only gets 1 count, so it's 1, then the 8th note gets 2 counts, so it's 1 E and 2 and 3 E and 4 triplet. In this bar, we start out with the triplet. The first is an 8th rest, taking up just the 1, and the quarter note takes up triplet, 2 counts. So it's 1 triplet. Here we have a dotted 8 taking up 3/16, so that would be 2 E and 3 and we have an 8th rest on 4, so that takes up 4, and then the and is broken into 2/16, so it's 4 and And then in this bar we have something new, we didn't really cover it yet, but we have a quarter note triplet instead of 8th note triplets. Each quarter note gets 2 8th notes, so we're going to count 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 and 4 and So I'm going to read these bars in time. Right now we just looked at them to study them. Let's play that last bar, the last line in time. 1, 2 and 3 triplet, 4 E and 1 and 2 and 3 triplet, 4 E and 1 E and 2 and 3 E and 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 E and 3 and 4 E and 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 and 4 E and So we covered a lot in this video. I hope that it's all clear. The next video we will deal with different pitches, reading rhythms, reading lines like this, but only on different lines of a music staff. Okay, good luck with this. Be patient. When you're reading it, you don't have to read it in time at first. Just read it as slow as you need to think about it. And then, once you get good at it, then start trying to keep the time. So, for instance, this bar here, I could say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I'm reading it out of time purposely just so I can think about every note or rest that I see. I have to look at it, I have to identify what it is, and I have to give it the proper number of counts. Now that's a lot to digest when you're first starting out. Once you get good at these, then you play it in time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, good luck. I'll see you on the next video.